Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Risk with Dr. Naveen Agarwal. Each week, we talk about a topic related to risk management of medical devices in a very casual and informal way. This is not a webinar or lecture. Rather, our goal is to talk about key topics and challenges in a very informal way and share best practices. I'm your host, Naveen Agarwal, and I'm the principal and founder at Achieve, where my personal mission is to help you achieve success in risk management. My guest in this episode is Chuck Ventura. Chuck is an engineer by training, and he has many years of experience developing and launching medical devices. He started his own company developing a very innovative medical device a few years back. So he knows how to manage risk throughout the device development process, and he has acquired some best practices through his experience. In practice, it becomes very difficult to integrate risk management with design controls. But Chuck, in this episode, is able to share some deep insights with us. What works, what doesn't work. We had this conversation in front of a live audience as part of the weekly Let's Talk Risk Live series. You're about to hear a recording of our conversation. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Well, hello everyone, and welcome once again to our weekly Let's Talk Risk conversation. Now, this topic, guys, as an engineer and also as a risk practitioner, is very close to my heart. And when Chuck and I connected a couple of months ago now, I think, I was really fascinated by Chuck's real-world experience. He has seen it. He has been through the entire process. He knows where the problems are when we try to integrate risk management with design controls. Now, intuitively, all of us know that we should do it, right? Sometimes we say it's a requirement, but we should do it. It makes business sense. But I think in practice, it becomes quite challenging. So this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about maybe an example where it might not have worked as well and what happened. Maybe another example where it actually helped in a big way. So we're going to talk about that. But guys, this is again a very high-level conversation. We are not going to dig too much in detail because we want to hear from you. And that is the most important aspect of a conversation. So with that, I'm going to get started. And Chuck, I'm so excited to welcome you. I know you and I have talked a couple of times, and every time I have a conversation with you, I feel tremendously energized by your energy and by your experience, the real world experience. So welcome to this program today, Chuck. Please introduce yourself a little bit to our audience.
Yeah, thanks, Naveen. Thanks for having me on the call, and excited to be here and talk with everybody. Yeah, just my background: I'm a biomedical engineer by training with a master's in mechanical and aerospace engineering. Been in the industry for close to 20 years. Started out at Baxter Healthcare with combination products, well before they were regulated as combination products, and over there, learned a lot about risk management and design controls, went on to Hospira. Then I was over at Pfizer, engineering manager of research and development for combination products, managing systems and risk. Actually resigned from Pfizer on good terms about 8 years ago to pursue entrepreneurship, where I served as CEO and co-founder of a company called Hemotech Medical, in which we essentially took a new safety needle concept for the hemodialysis industry from scratch through breakthrough designation and IDE and ultimately commercial deal with a larger medical device partner, and also serve as CEO and founder of Ventura Solutions, which is a consulting and staffing business in the medical device and combination product space.
That's awesome, Chuck. So it's very clear to me that you have a lot of real-world problem-solving experience, and I'm sure you have seen some good examples, some bad examples of bringing in risk inside the design and development process. So, as I said before in my introduction, I think intuitively everybody understands and agrees with it that, hey, risk management should be a part of our design and development process. But it seems to me that we find it difficult in practice. So I would like to just start by asking you to share your thoughts, if, first of all, that is true in your experience as well, and why is it so that we find it difficult?
Yeah. So yeah, just kind of going back to my a little bit of my background. Like in general, I think systems engineering in general and risk management and design controls is something I've always been really interested in, and I've really liked it because the medical device product development process is just it's a chaotic process, right? You have various requirements, multiple stakeholders, project deadlines, et cetera. And, at its core, it essentially kind of helps keep track and organize a lot of the chaos, right? So that's something that I've always really enjoyed about it. And, that's why I've always kind of leveraged it and gravitated towards it. So, that being said, what were you looking for? Maybe a few examples or?
Yeah. Why does it become so difficult? Certainly you talked about the chaotic nature and all the requirements and design reviews and all that stuff. And engineers are trying to prove a concept, right? Make it work. That's what they are focused on. So yeah, let's share an example from your experience where it didn't really work that well, and what could we learn from it?
Yeah, no, I think I'll get to an example here. And I think the first point is, I think some of the struggles is it does take time. It does take effort, right? You got to sit down and, one thing that always kind of frustrates me a little bit is when people refer to it as just the paperwork.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I had to go to a doctor visit the other day and I had to fill out paperwork.
Right.
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 And I was getting kind of annoyed because I was just kind of writing this. They keep asking the same questions in the paperwork. And, that's really paperwork.
Yeah.
That's paperwork. What's your name? What's your address? What's your emergency contact? Like that's true paperwork.
Yeah.
Risk analysis and design controls and writing requirements. This is not paperwork.
Yeah.
That's the first thing that everybody has to understand. This is actual engineering analysis. And hey, I love engineering and I love technical design, but I think sometimes we as engineers struggle to just sit down and really think it through and document it, but do the analysis and make sure it's well thought out, right?
Yeah.
Because we as engineers want to build things. We want to build prototypes. We want to test prototypes. But I think, at least me, even myself, who loves doing it, okay, it's still kind of hard to sit down and really do it correctly. But again, I just want to make it clear, it's not just paperwork.
That's I think, and that mindset and culture should prevail within our organizations that, hey, it is good for our product and process. It's not just like 5 people getting together in a meeting room because we have to finish an FMEA and document it, right? We have to take it slightly differently. So yeah, please go ahead. And I would love to hear an example from you where you tried it, but it didn't really work out that well from a risk management point of view.
Yeah, I mean, this like an example of where I saw it could have worked out, okay, but it wasn't really taken too seriously. Trying to stay kind of high level here so I don't give out too much confidential or any confidential information. But it was for a combination product. You could think of it as a cross-labeled combination product where there was a cartridge kind of delivery separate, sold separately from the actual delivery system, right? And the company wanted to develop a smaller version, right? Like a different size. And what happened is we identified early in the use-related risk analysis that there could be a potential mix-up, right? Where they could take for example, the larger cartridge and put it in the smaller delivery system, which was the new and innovative one, right? So we identified that this is a use here. We identified some of the risks, but unfortunately, I think at the time I was a younger engineer, right? So we did the use-related risk analysis. We identified this very early in the development process, but I'm afraid it was just kind of looked at as paperwork. Someone wrote it down as a risk, right? And it just wasn't really taken too seriously. And ultimately, after years and years of, millions and millions of dollars, and years of development, once, this actually got a lot, this use here ended up getting a lot of scrutiny from the FDA when the company was trying to get it on the market. And ultimately, they end up having a lot of issues in human factor summative. And it became so big, it got so messy that, it just didn't make sense to go forward with the project. And they actually killed the project.
Wow.
So this is a real life experience of how not taking this seriously in the beginning, literally, resulted in substantial financial loss and time, right? It's quite amazing to think that if that USER was taken seriously, right, early in the concept phase and not just thought of, it's some paperwork, right? What it could have led to.
And maybe treating this as paperwork, treating this as like something like a problem-solving approach where we enroll people, have a conversation, and make quick decisions. Hey, are we going to do it or not? So actually, I was going to go to going to ask you that example that we, I think, talked about a little bit before we went live, is where you were able to make some design choices through early conversations about risk. Could you please share that now?
Yeah, I could give an example of that. I think everybody knows in general for overall product lifecycle management, right? Risk management is key to managing complaints and making decisions, quality decisions, and it's needed, right? But I think there could be even more emphasis on integrating it early into the product development process, because it seems, especially when you're trying to exit concept phase and in a little bit more in design input phase, but mostly in concept phase, where people just seem to think it's again just a check in the box, right? One example with my startup Hemotech Medical was early in the concept stage. We were looking at different concepts for our safety needle. We were really struggling with the certain key aspects and different concepts. We had maybe hundreds of concepts, but when we kind of got down to like 3 to 5 concepts, we were having difficulty with this safety mechanism. And one idea was, well, why don't we have the user interact with the device, right? To engage the safety mechanism before they use the product. And this was identified as a potential use here, right? That if they don't engage with that, right, before it may not meet its intended use. So we took that very seriously, to the extent that we actually even developed prototypes, right? And we went to end users and we had them evaluate the different prototypes. And we got to the point where we came to the conclusion that just was not going to be good enough. Because there's 50 million of these utilized per year, 50 million utilized.
Right.
And even a small, like 1 in a million of people not using it, which a lot of companies would say that's a low probability, right? Extremely low, 1 out of a million for a P1 rating for the failure mode for the user. That would result in a significant amount of failures, right? So we decided to, instead of, because that would have been the easy way to just use that. Okay, we decided to divert our resources into designing a product that had an integrated design features, right? Which according to ISO 14971 is the best type of risk controls.
That's right.
Design.
That's right.
So let's eliminate the user dependent risk control and convert it into more of a non-user dependent risk control, right? And integrate it into the design. And, we diverted resources into focusing on a concept that did not take any additional clinical steps. And basically eliminated that use error. And, the result has been a very streamlined product development, right? And in all of our usability and clinical studies, we've had, close to zero issues.
That's wonderful. So what you're saying is basically this conversation and discussion helped you to make the right design choices early. And when you do that, then your product development process is also streamlined. You make better decisions. You are, producing better results. So I think this is a wonderful example and perfect time for me to start opening the conversation. Guys, I'm going to invite you to just share your thoughts. But what I would suggest is we are not trying to problem solve here. We are not trying to problem solve what might have happened in the first case or what might not have happened in the second case. What we want to do is basically invite you to share your thoughts about what you have found to be a challenge when you try to integrate risk into design controls. Can you share some best practices or advices? Or if you have a specific question for Chuck, that's also welcome. But I would like this to be more of a sort of conversation and not really a deep dive problem solving session. So with that, I know Ryan, you are requesting to speak, so I'm going to bring you on. And again, as I bring people up here, feel free to raise your hand. Even now, I can bring more than one person at a time. So Ryan, you are on. Go ahead and please unmute your mic and share what you have in mind. Ryan, can you hear me? You may have to find the mute button. Yeah, you got it.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Go ahead, Ryan, please.
Oh, okay. Good morning. Good morning, Chuck. I do have a question. I apologize. I joined a little bit late. So one of the how would it say, confusing factors of talking about, you mentioned FMEA, and I'm not really sure if that's defined really well, or if you identified what you mean by using or applying design FMEA. Can you give a brief expectation of what that is? And that
I could. Yeah, no, that's a good question. It's a very common question. So
Chuck, before you answer that, let me give you an example of what I mean. So in my context of using FMEA, it's primarily implemented or applied after a design concept is established. It can be used to evaluate several different design concepts, but the key is to identify weaknesses or flaws that may be already within that concept, and from that identify or at least raise up the risks that came out of the analysis, and potential options on what to do about reducing those risks. Part of it involves understanding what the use factors are, or I should say external noise factors, let's put it that way. You mentioned in your example, it could be used in a way that a misuse, let's put it that way. If that was not identified in the concept design of the intended and unintended uses, then the FMEA itself would not consider that. It's similar to, should my car work on the moon? Should it work at 50,000 feet? Should it work underwater? Well, we're assuming this product should work at a, ground level. So please, if you can.
Thank you, Ryan. Go ahead, Chuck.
Yeah, just so what's kind of the specific question there then, just so I make sure I don't have a tangent.
Yep. What is your definition, understanding of applying FMEA, and where and when, and what's your expected outcome of that?
Yeah. Okay. I got you. That's a good question. Great question. So in a perfect world, I would love, okay, so here's my approach is concept phase, right? If I'm looking at different concepts, at a minimum, I like to do like a system risk assessment, right? And then at a high level, look at for different concepts. Let's say you have 3 concepts. The first question is, do all the same hazards apply, right? Because if one concept is a pure mechanical disposable, there's no electrical related or software hazards, right? And then I like to look at that system risk assessment for the different concepts, right? And you could even start thinking then a little more granular. What about hazardous? Once you get through that level, now what hazardous situations apply, and what sequence of events, right? Because maybe 3 concepts have the same hazards, which is the more likely case, right? Because you're probably zeroing in on a certain system level solution. But now start thinking about hazardous situations and sequence of events, right? At a little bit of a higher level. Now, of course, as you're identifying some of these sequence of events, you're thinking about failure modes, but you're not necessarily getting into all the nitty gritty. Now, in a perfect world, I would love to do a full-blown DFMEA on every single concept in the concept stage. But if you don't have those resources, which is usually the case, at a minimum, really doing the system risk assessment and thinking about the different hazards, then the next level hazard situations, and going on, as I mentioned, sequence of events. Because with one concept, as you're thinking of the different failure modes, you could at least identify different sequence of events. Okay. So that's how I'd approach that. And then as you zero in on a concept architecture, I would, at least at a minimum in the design output phase, but potentially earlier in the design input phase, as you're zeroing in on the actual concept and system architecture, I would start formulating that DFMEA.
Yeah, so I love this, Chuck, because what I'm hearing you say is that we have to be able to consider a variety of tools and techniques appropriately. It's not just one versus the other. So, of course, we can talk about FMEAs and risk assessments for a long time, so I'm going to move on. If I remember correctly, I think, Phil, you were next. So please go ahead and unmute your mic and share what you have in mind.
Yes, thank you, Naveen. Also, Chuck, thank you for a comment that's very near and dear to my heart, being in human factors. I'm going to keep this brief because we have quite a few people that want to speak up. But so I have a small amount of experience in human factors, but a lot of experience in usability. And I've started off in a consultancy with human factors and went over to manufacturing with a couple companies. And I feel like that your situation I've seen that myself, and I feel like it's with people that have probably not had a lot of experience with FDA or aren't as readily knowledgeable about what FDA expects, right? To fix or not to fix. In my experience, the only thing that I've seen that has helped with that issue that you had was bringing up from a business aspect what kind of damage it could cause in the future, right?
Yeah.
So NNG and Amy both have quite a few research articles and papers on, what good human factors will do and save for the company in the long term, and show how inexpensive it is early on and how expensive it becomes later on.
Great point, Phil. Chuck, do you want to add to that a little bit?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I think I think a lot of executives understand this concept, right? Like if you make a design change early, it saves X opposed to later. But I think, also just taking it seriously and following the process, right? Like if we would have, I say we, but at the time I was a younger engineer, if it was taken more seriously and actually integrated into early human factors, formative testing, right? They may have realized that the use here is greater than they expected.
Yes.
So I think I take a couple of key points from that conversation, Chuck. Is one, as risk practitioners, we have a slightly bigger role to play in helping people take it seriously, as you mentioned, right? It's more of a facilitation role, more of a leadership role, and don't quit, don't give up. If you feel like the points you are bringing out are not being taken seriously, don't give up because you're part of the team. So I know we have a lot of people waiting. Nirmal, you are next. Please unmute your mic and share what you have in mind.
Hey, Chuck. I hope you guys are doing well. And my question is very generic. I just want to know your thought process. Like, how do you reach to the point of defining your product requirements to mitigate the hazardous situations that you find in your hazards analysis? Like, I just want to know, what thought process that you have found effective.
Chuck, before you answer that, first, Nirmal, I'm going to say thank you for being so precise in your question. This is a perfect way of positioning the question, which is very precise. I appreciate it. Go ahead, Chuck.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty straightforward answer. I think when people create design inputs, I think everybody knows that they should align with the intended use of the product. So, you go first and collect your user needs and your stakeholder needs, right? Your regulatory requirements and standards, et cetera. And those are inputs into your design input document. But I think sometimes people don't put as much emphasis on what I consider the third input, which is the output of risk management, right? And that's specified in ISO 1345
Yes.
And so basically, if you integrate that into your process, right, that design inputs are created from system level user needs, stakeholder needs, but also risk controls. As you do that early risk assessment, you'll kind of force yourself to consider creating design inputs based on the identified hazard and hazardous situations. And of course, as you go downstream in your development into your DFMEA, you'll start to think a little bit more about controlling within your design specifications and design outputs, and then ultimately your PFMEA, which you'll start to now think more about your manufacturing control strategy as risk controls.
So it should have some kind of a structure, right? And a disciplined approach, some kind of a structure and a follow-up. So that's another insight for risk practitioners, is that if we are not seeing that type of a reaction or follow-up from the team at large, I think we need to kind of just bring it up over and over again. Hey, it's time for us to see if we have output of risk management being integrated or not, right? Thank you, Chuck, for that. Ed, I know you have been waiting patiently, so you are next. Please unmute your mic and share what you have in mind. Ed Bills, can you hear me? Okay. Oh, you got it. You got it finally, Ed. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad that you brought Chuck on. Chuck and I have worked together in the past, and he's got a good grasp of situations. He's bringing real world examples.
Yes. I love it.
And FMEA pops up into the picture. What I wanted to present is if you're in the LinkedIn medical device risk management group, of which I'm one of the moderators, and if you want in, all you got to do is ask. There's a great 4-part discussion that started out originally on the RAPS Open Forum with Kevin Randall. And Kevin did such a good job, we had him bring it over to the Medical Device Forum. So you might want to read that, but there's been a lot of back and forth, and I know you have also discussed this, Naveen, about the use of FMEA, and it's a something that, when used properly, is a great tool. And in the medical,
Ed, I think you're breaking up. Can you still hear us? If not, we'll give Ed a couple of moments to join back. But what I will do, guys, is that I will share a link to that post that Ed is talking about in the comment section of this event that you can access. But, this conversation is going on for a long time, and I do not want this to be a FMEA versus non-FMEA kind of a conversation. It's just a tool. So let's move on, because we have only a few minutes. Okay, go ahead, Ed. You're back. Go ahead, Ed. Finish your thought.
I wanted to bring up 24971 as well.
Yes.
A lot of people don't have that. That's actually, you really ought to have that if you're going to implement medical device risk management. That document is something that you need to have, and it talks about all the various tools that are available. And Naveen has talked about PHA in the past, and PHA is one that fits in with what Chuck is saying too. Is start early in the development of the product with your risk management activities, because actually, if you do any clinical trials, you're required to do risk analysis to do those first. So that whole feasibility area, there's risk analysis going on there. So the earlier you start, the cheaper it's going to be in the long run, and you're going to have a better product out the door. So this has been a great conversation.
I look at it this way, like a good engineer or a technician, you need many tools in your toolbox, and you need to know when to use what tool. We have very little time left, guys, and I have 2 more people waiting patiently. Gayatri, you are next. Please unmute your mic and share what you have in mind. Gayatri, can you hear me? Okay.
Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Hi, Chuck. Hi, Naveen. Thanks for this opportunity. So, I had a question. So, when it comes to risk mitigation, what is the strategy that we follow when it comes to integrating design controls? Do we pay attention to this in the early developmental stage of medical devices, or how is it normally done? Like, strategy for it.
Yeah, I have a couple of quick thoughts on that. As I mentioned in your system risk assessment, like a high level hazard analysis, it's still pretty detailed. When you identify risk controls, right, those could be apparent to your design inputs. And when you do that, also identify whether or not your risk control is user dependent or not user dependent. That's actually something key that I wanted to touch on, because if it's user dependent, it's going to have to most likely flow into your design validation strategy. And if it's non-user dependent, it'll have to flow into your design verification strategy. And the less you depend on user dependent risk controls, the better.
And guys, I'm gonna give a plug to Bijan Elahi's book. Bijan is in the audience today. He has written a book, Safety Risk Management of Medical Devices. A lot of practical tips and examples. So consider that. We have had Bijan on the program a couple of times. Great resource. Please reach out to him as well as other folks as well. So again, Jeff, last but not the least, and sincerely appreciate your patience, my friend. Please go ahead and unmute your mic and share what you have in mind.
Thanks, Naveen. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, please.
Okay, excellent. Chuck, great points all around. Good to hear your thoughts. My observation on the whole, how do you get away from the checklist mentality, honestly, probably comes from the corporate culture itself. It's like there's so many things you have to do to develop a medical device. People are just looking for, what do I have to do next? There's, if the company doesn't allow a lot of time for development, the checklist mentality kind of kicks in. And, everything we talked about, characterizing the product ahead of time, don't just jump into the paperwork. I think, my experience, this all flows into that. You have to figure out a way for the quality system to allow you the chance to characterize the product and think about things as part of the development, rather than just go straight to the 20 checklists you have to fill out and documents that you have to fill out. It's above and beyond risk. It's more the quality culture of the company that can have a big effect on that. That's been my experience there. As a risk management practitioner, that's the biggest fight I have in almost all of my assignments, is getting people to move beyond the checklist and think about what's really going on with the product.
Yeah.
I'm convinced that if engineers get the chance, they'd love to do it, but they don't get the chance. They're under the gun, time-wise and money-wise all the time. And to be able to encourage them to actually get in their minds and get on paper what the product is would probably go a long way to solving most of these issues. But I don't have the answers, but
that's wonderful, Jeff. And I think that's a perfect last word. As risk practitioners, we have to be aware of that pretty difficult challenge. But here's the final point, guys. In this challenge is also an opportunity to shape the culture, the environment, take ownership, and in doing so, we'll advance our own careers. That I'm pretty convinced of. Guys, so like always, we fly through this, a lot of good conversation. It's not the end of it. I'm going to give Chuck a couple of minutes to gather his thoughts and share maybe 2 key takeaway messages. But in the meantime, I want to share with you my usual 3-point housekeeping announcements. First of all, this is, as you see, this is just a casual conversation. So I want to set the expectations for you that this is not a webinar, not a lecture. Our goal is to connect with each other. So all are welcome. As much conversation as possible is our goal. If you want to be part of this conversation as a guest speaker, I know you have unique insights to share. So raise your hand, reach out to me, and we will plan something. No preparations required. Absolutely none. Second, if you miss these conversations, which are always at 11 a.m. Eastern, you can go to my Substack website. The link is there on the event page. And go under the podcast tab. You will find the recording of every prior conversation. Take a listen. We have a ton of good stuff over there. Okay, with that, Chuck, I want to give the floor to you one last time, and please share just 2 or 3 key takeaway messages we can take from today.
Yeah, no, thanks. thanks again for the opportunity here to speak, and I think everyone had a lot of great questions too. So, I think one of the main takeaways here is what Jeff mentioned too. Is ultimately, this type it does start from the top, right? So, to Naveen's point, I think we need to continue to just keep shaping the culture and pushing. And there was another comment, I'm sorry, I can't remember the individual name, but about the business impacts, right? So articles and conversations like that to make sure, upper management and leadership at these companies, at medical device manufacturers, understand the importance, I think is something that we need to continue to shape and push for. And just, the other big takeaway is that we need to not consider it just paperwork, right? It's actual engineering analysis. It may actually be more engineering than the design to a certain extent.
Yes.
And take the time to do it. And the only other tip I would say is think about trying to do it in real time, right? That's something that I did, or we implemented with our startup, Hemotech Medical, is, if you identify a USER, you identify a new hazardous situation, open up the risk document and add it then, right? Even if you're on Rev A or Rev B, you start in the next draft. Just add it and do it in real time. And before you release the document, then, you do the more thorough and quality checks and all that. But I like the idea of real-time, integrated risk management, like truly integrate it.
I just
if it
love
comes
it.
up in a meeting, if a USER comes up in a meeting or a failure mode or a hazardous situation, have the risk conversation then.
Right now.
With the And so I think key takeaways, early integration, more than just paperwork, right? And I love kind of Jeff's point too about making sure it's throughout the organization, because ultimately it does have to come. I think it does have to come from the top, but everyone has to continue to push.
We have a role to play, but I think the final takeaway I will share with you guys is, look, what a beautiful conversation we had because of so many people participating. I think as a community, we have collective knowledge that we can learn from. So I encourage you to reach out and connect with people. Don't spam them. I think you have the ability to message them, anybody who's attending the conversation today. Be a part of this conversation. So we will all learn together. These are kind of big problems to solve. There are so many resources. Ed mentioned 24971. Bijan has a book. So many people have so many resources that we can learn from. I hope you will take advantage of that and become a very active member of our community that we are building. With that, guys, I want to thank all of you. What a wonderful, energizing conversation we had today. I'm pumped up about this. Chuck, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insights. And guys, we will meet again next week. Until then, have a good one.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.